10 of the most common questions I'm asked by beginning quilters. Hi everyone, I'm Mary from Joyful and Mary Quilting, and when I'm teaching a class or giving a lecture or reading through comments on my YouTube videos, there are always several questions I'm asked over and over again by new quilters. So I thought, you know what, why not start a series where I give you a simple and easy answer to those common questions. So for this particular video, I chose 10 of the most common questions that I receive. If you have additional questions, please leave them in the comments and I'll add them to the list. So let's get started. Question number 1. What basic tools and supplies do I need to get started with quilting? You know what, that is a great question. When you're just starting out, you don't need every gadget in the quilt shop, like, you know, this handmade wooden hair marker, really nice. Or maybe even this You and Me pressing bar, love it. Or this rotary mat, which I use all the time. They're great tools, but you know what? You don't need to break the bank when you're just starting out. When you see all the fun tools available, I will be the first to admit that it's really difficult not to buy every single one. But you know what? Give yourself a little time to test the water before you start making those purchases. So here's what I recommend to get you started. First of all, you need a reliable sewing machine, and I'll talk more about this later in the video. Secondly, a rotary cutter is essential. You need one with a nice, sharp blade that can be easily changed. 45 millimeters is really a good standard that most quilters use. Now, there's the Olfa brand, which is really inexpensive, and it works like a charm. It works really well. Now, this is the Faymore or the Missouri Star Quilt Company. They're exactly the same. A little more expensive, but it really is an easy to use rotary cutter. It's very slick. There's not a lot of tension on your wrist and on your hand, and I love this one as well. So again, when you're just starting out, you don't need to buy the most expensive one. Test these out, see if you like them. If they're not working for you, you can always upgrade. The next thing you need is a self-healing cutting mat. There are two kinds of mats, self-healing and non-self-healing. Those that are not self-healing can actually wear your rotary blades out more quickly, and they are a little more difficult to cut on. You don't want those if you can avoid them. You want the kind that when you cut, it heals back up and you don't have those gouges and lines in your mat. This mat is years and years old, and it looks like brand new. You can't see any of the cut marks, and I've used it for cutting a lot. Now, there are also larger mats. You don't need the great big huge one to begin with if you don't want. They are rather expensive. You can find them on sale. Make sure that you get one that works for your cutting area. The next thing we need is a good quality quilting ruler. I'm going to put this white underneath it just so that you can see what I have. You want one that is of good quality because rulers are not all equal. Some of them will not be as accurate as others, and you know if you get a good quality ruler, you'll have that accuracy there. My favorites are Creative Grids and Quilters Select. They're a little expensive, but it's worth it to have a good quality ruler. So what size do you need when you first start out? Because there are tons of rulers out there, and there is every size you can possibly imagine. The first ruler that you absolutely need is this large. It's a 6.5 inch or 6 inch by 24.5 inch or 24 inch. You can buy both sizes. Either one works. This is when you cut yardage. You're going to need a large ruler. You will also need a smaller ruler for cutting those smaller pieces. This is my 2.5 by 12.5. Essential. I use this until I wear the numbers off of it, and then I buy a new one. It is such a good ruler. The other size that you need, I think, is a large square ruler. The 12.5 by 12.5 is so versatile because it not only works for the size that we use most often, 12.5 inch squares, but if you have a smaller block, 10 inch, 6 inch, 8 inch, whatever, you can still use this ruler for cutting those smaller blocks. And actually having a large ruler over your fabric tends to stabilize it. So it's a good purchase. If you want to buy another one, The 6.5 inch ruler is a great ruler as well. Now, what I like about the Creative Grids, not only the markings on all sorts of good stuff about it, but it also has a non-skid surface. All these dots on the back, and then there's some larger dots on the back as well, have a non-skid surface on the ruler, so they don't slip and slide a lot on your fabric. They can slip a little bit, but it's pretty minimal, and I love this brand of ruler. I also like the Quilters Select rulers. Now, Quilters Select has a non-skid surface completely on the back. It does not move when I am cutting. When I put it down on my cutting mat and on my fabric, I don't have a problem with the ruler moving. So I love Quilters Select. Actually, this one's a little old-fashioned now because they've come out with a clearer ruler. This is rather opaque. They have come out with a ruler that's clear. So I have not checked those out yet, but Quilters Select, again, is another good brand. Another size that if you want, but again, not essential, once you get into quilting and you decide you like what you're doing, a 6-inch by 12-inch ruler is a great ruler just for cutting smaller pieces. Some of them come 6.5 by 12.5. Again, this is a Quilters Select. Now, if you don't want to spend all the money on Quilters Select or Creative Grids because you're just not quite sure, what you can do is you can purchase GRIPPY. This is a spray can. It'll last a lifetime. And what you do is you take the more inexpensive rulers. You can buy the OmniGrid rulers. They don't have the non-skid surface on them. So what you do is just turn the back side up, spray it on the back, spray the GRIPPY on it, and it works really well to hold this ruler in place. So I love this product. And again, you can actually spend less. OmniGrid is a great product and you'll have a great ruler. You can buy all those sizes I previously mentioned in the OmniGrid brand name and then just use the GRIPPY. The next thing you'll need is a good quality thread. I prefer Aurifil 100% cotton thread or Gutermann thread. Either one works. The Gutermann that I've used is polyester. Aurifil, as I said, is 100% cotton. In my bobbin, I put a polyester thread. Now, 50 weight is an average size of thread. That's what you're going to want to look for. If you have a higher number, the thread will be thinner. So the higher number has the thinner thread, the lower number is a thicker thread. For my bobbins, I like to use the pre-wound bobbins, but again, you don't have to. You can basically use the thread on your spool and wind your own bobbins. What I like about these is that they're pre-wound and they're a 60 weight polyester, so they last a long time, and I like that. You don't need to buy every color thread in the rainbow, depending on your fabrics that you're using. These will all work. A white, a gray, an off-white, or a black is all I ever use for piecing or when I'm putting my blocks together to create my quilt top. They will work. When you're top stitching or doing quilting, different ball game. We're not talking about that here. But you only need some basic threads. If I had to pick from these which thread I would use, I'd pick the light gray, and that's all I'd ever use. But sometimes I do use some of the other colors as well. As you can see, these are my favorite right here, that gray thread. And the Aurifil 100% cotton 50 weight works well for me. The next thing you'll need is you will need pins and you will need clips. There are all sorts of pins out there, long ones, short ones, fat ones. Some have a long head on them, some are glass head, some you can iron over, some you can't. So many to pick from. Basically, when you're just getting started, you need a sharp pin. I prefer either the Magic 0.5 millimeter. I like these because they have a long head on them so that they're easy to get out. You can see them easy when you're sewing. I also like the Clover extra fine patchwork pins. Now this is my Purple Hobbies pin holder. And I like it because I can take it with me. You just unscrew the lid and then this unscrews, it's magnetic, and you set it down in the lid and look at, there's all my pins. These are my ultrafine. They are very sharp and they slide through the fabric so nicely. I love these, both of them. When I'm doing either foundation piecing, I need a flathead pin, and that's where I prefer the Magic flathead pins. Again, there's 100 pins in this. This one is the 2-inch length, which I love. They're just called the regular pins. You can get flathead pins all over and they will work too, but I really think these last a long time and I like them. The other thing you need are little clips. Now, I like these little clips. I just bought them on Amazon, 100 of them for hardly nothing. And they work if you're just holding pieces together, especially layers when you're putting on binding. You just need one package of them. And I think they work really well for what we need for quilting. So these are the essentials when it comes to pins and clips for our quilting experience. The next thing you need is a seam ripper. Unfortunately, we all have to rip everything out on occasion, and you want a good quality seam ripper. Now, in my free workshop, How to Create the Perfect Quilt Block Every Time, I talk all about seam rippers, how to use a seam ripper correctly. You'll be amazed, but you'll need a seam ripper. This one is a little more expensive because it has a nice handmade handle. This is just one that I bought online, and it's called a Seam Fix. And it actually has the seam ripper, plus it has this little end that helps you clean up those threads. Either one works. You can just buy an inexpensive one to start with. When you get to the point where you'd like to find one that's a little more expensive, there are all kinds of seam rippers out there. Again, you don't need to break the bank. A basic Clover or Dritz seam ripper works really well. The next thing you need is an iron and an ironing board. You want an iron that heats up well, but you know what? You can buy a great iron at Walmart or online for less than $20, and it will work really well for you. There are more expensive irons, Oliso, Rowenta, they all make more expensive irons. I have not found any that doesn't spit rust when I put water into my iron. So I feel like I need to use my water in a mister bottle, and I spray that. I never put water in my iron. It doesn't matter if it's an inexpensive iron or an expensive one. You just want an iron that's going to heat up and it's going to press your fabric nicely. I also have a mister bottle where I put pressing solution in here. Mary Ellen's Best Press or Terriel Magic, half water, half solution are my favorites. I buy them by the gallon and I fill up my mister bottles as needed. I also recommend a pressing marker. Now this is just an empty marker. The link is in the description. It's used for paint, but I put pressing solution in here. And then I actually put the pressing solution on my seams, and it helps to make a really flat seam. I have a video that talks about this. The video link is in the description. Question number 2. What is an accurate 1/4 inch seam, and why is it so important when quilting? Okay, don't get me started about why I don't use the unmeasurable term scant seam. I have a video on that. If you'd like to watch it, you can. But what we talk about and what I recommend is an accurate seam. If you go again to my workshop, my free workshop, there's a whole section with accompanying videos on how to mark your sewing machine so that you get that accurate seam. Now, I will always have the naysayers that'll say, as long as you're sewing consistently, you will be fine, everything will work out. That couldn't be further from the truth, because what happens is if you are sewing together all the same size squares and that seam, either too big or too small, is consistent, yeah, you'll be fine. But once you start piecing blocks together that have a smaller square and a larger rectangle, and you're trying to get them all to fit, that seam has to be an accurate 1/4 inch. Just being consistent is not enough. So watch the video and you will be so impressed with the way your seams turn out if you have an accurate 1/4 inch seam. Question number 3. How do I choose fabric for my first quilt? This is the quilt that we make in the beginning quilting course. And as you can see, it has 3 fabrics. It has a light, a medium, and a dark. It is so easy to see light, medium, and dark because it's obvious. But if you're not quite sure if it's a light or if it's a medium or what that contrast is, one thing that you can do is you can take your fabrics, and here I've selected 4 fabrics. Now, if we take a look at this, which is the light, which is the medium, which is the dark, or are they all light or all medium or all dark? Sometimes it's really hard to tell. What you can do is take a picture with your camera or your phone of the fabrics and then turn it into black and white mode. And this is going to show you exactly what that contrast is. Now, looking at these, it's pretty obvious. This is going to be a light, here's our medium, and here's our dark. But what if we're just not sure about these two? So if we take a picture of these two, we can actually see, let's put these together, light, medium, dark, or let's put these together, light, medium, and dark. That really helps when we take that picture and turn it into black and white mode to see exactly what we have here. Sometimes the contrast doesn't matter that much, but sometimes it does, especially in a quilt like this. You want to make sure that you've got exactly what you want before you buy the fabric and put it into your quilt. Now, the other issue that you might have are the patterns in your quilt. And I've seen this happen so many times where people will select cute prints and they'll think, well, they're different, so they ought to be good. And they'll try and put these prints together and create a block, and instead we have chaos. So you want to make sure, like we have here, that we have a large print, we have kind of a medium print, and then we have almost a solid. And that really makes a difference when we're looking at our quilt and being able to get that visual when it comes to the contrast and the patterns we use. Question number 4. Do I really need to pre-wash my fabric before quilting? That is totally a personal choice. And you will have the pre-washers that will swear by it. They've had fabric bleed when they've washed a quilt that's been finished and ruined it. And then you have others that say that's never happened to me. Pre-washing removes chemicals, it softens the fabric, and really any shrinkage that's going to happen happens before you actually cut your pieces to put it in the quilt. The other thing that it does is if there's going to be any bleeding when you pre-wash that fabric, you're going to see it. Now, what I like to do, I kind of go halfway between, is I cut a swatch of fabric and I put it in a bowl of water with color catchers. Now, when I do that, especially if it's like a really bright red or a dark black or a dark blue or a vibrant green, those are the colors that tend to bleed. So I will put it in there and then I'll take a look and see if there's any color in the water. If there is, there are products such as Synthropol and Retain that you can look up how to use, and that will help stabilize those colors. I have a video on that. The link is in the description if you're interested, and you can make your own choice as to whether or not you want to pre-wash your fabrics. Question number 5, how do I accurately cut fabric using a rotary cutter and a ruler? It's so important when you are cutting your fabric that you take your ruler and you lay the ruler along the fabric like this. So usually what we do is we will take our width of fabric, which is selvage edge to selvage edge. It's usually too big to cut. So what we'll do is fold it in half. So we have the manufacturer's fold here. We have our selvage edges here, and then we're going to cut. Now we know we never sew the selvage edge into our quilt, but at this point when we're cutting the pieces, we just leave it on. It's easier that way. Now, what we want to do first of all is we want to make sure that we realize the line on our ruler needs to stay on top of the fabric. It's not on this side of the fabric, and we don't want to see any fabric here. We want it to be right on top and then make our cut. That's what's going to give us an accurate cut. That's also in my video, my free workshop on how to create the perfect quilt block every time. Take a look. I show you how to avoid the dreaded V that comes on strips when we cut and we don't have everything folded properly. It's easier for me to refer you to that than to do it here, but that's what's really important. You want to make sure that you understand how to use your ruler, how to use it accurately, and how to make sure that those cuts that you make are going to be consistent throughout your quilt. Question number 6. So how do I make sure my quilt blocks are all going to come out the right size? You know it happens all the time. We have 12.5-inch blocks, and some of them come out 12.5 inches, some come out 12 3/4, some come out 12 1/8. They can be all different sizes depending on the technique that we use when we are cutting our fabric and sewing our seams. That's where this accurate cut that I just talked about, as well as the 1/4-inch seam, is so important. We want to make sure that we do our very best to accurately take care of this. What's the key? Go slow. Don't speed through the process. Cut slowly. Make sure everything is there where you want it to be before you make that cut. When you are sewing, don't just speed through. Make your machine sew a little bit slower if you can, or just don't push down as hard on your foot pedal. Go slowly. Keep everything lined up. Make sure you have your 1/4-inch seam marking on your machine. Do everything possible that you can to make things accurate before you even begin. And then once you start sewing, it'll all come together. You might be off just a teeny tiny bit. You can always trim up a little bit. You can always fudge it a little bit here and there. And in a class, you'll learn how to do that in case something does go wrong. But for the most part, I think you'll be really pleased at the results if you just go slow and you make sure that you do everything as accurately as possible. The other thing you want to make sure you do is that you press your block and your seams rather than iron them. What's the difference? Pressing means that we lay our block out and we put the iron down for a couple seconds, pick it up and move it, pick it up and move it. When you're ironing, you're doing this, and you're moving the iron all over your block. It tends to cause stretching, especially if you've sprayed it with a pressing solution, and that can cause distortion. That can also cause you to have maybe a fold somewhere where you don't want it to be along the seam, and that's going to shrink in that block a little bit. All kinds of things can happen when we don't press our blocks. So you want to make sure you do that. Press and not iron. Question number 7. What's the difference between piecing and quilting? Piecing is sewing the fabric pieces together to create a quilt block. That's piecing. Quilting is when we stitch the 3 layers together, the quilt top, the batting, and the backing in a pattern so that we stabilize that quilt, we keep everything together, and we are able to then bind the quilt. That is quilting. You can do piecing either by machine or by hand. You can do quilting either by machine or by hand. Both are acceptable quilting methods. Sometimes we put the whole thing, quilting, in one category, but if we want to get picky, piecing is putting the strips or pieces or shapes together, the fabric pieces, and quilting is the actual design when we are stitching the 3 layers together. Question number 8. What are precuts? Precuts are used all the time in quilting, and basically they're just a line of fabric, usually from the same manufacturer, where they have cut specific widths or sizes of those pieces, and it makes it a little easier to quilt. You don't have to worry about matching your fabrics. They're already matched because they're the same line. There's usually a really nice variety. They're a little more expensive because they're already cut for you, but I really like the option of precuts. So if we're talking about a charm pack, that's a package of 5-inch squares. So it's usually about 40 to 42 squares in a charm pack. If we're talking about a jelly roll, different companies have different names, roly-polies, jelly rolls, whatever. A jelly roll is a Moda brand name, and it's actually 40 to 42 2.5-inch strips cut to the width of the fabric. So they're probably 2.5 inches by about 42 inches long. And it's a whole fabric line. Sometimes you'll have more than one of the same fabric because the line doesn't have 42 fabrics in it, but you get a really nice selection of fabrics. Now, they come this way, or different companies have them in different packaging. This is another example. Same thing, it's just the same fabric line, but they're just packaged in a little different way. We also have layer cakes. A layer cake is a 10-inch square, and it has 40 to 42, again, squares in the package. There are so many patterns that are out there that you can make from a layer cake. And then we have a fat quarter bundle. And a fat quarter bundle, again, is usually a line. A fat quarter is usually an 18-inch by 21-inch piece. It just means that rather than cut a 1/4 yard of fabric, which would be 9 inches by the width of the fabric, they cut 18 inches and then cut that piece in half. So it gives you more really fabric, a larger size fabric to work with. So that's what a fat quarter is. I love all of them. I use them all the time, especially if you're a beginner and you have trouble matching fabrics. This is a perfect way to go to give you a really beautiful arrangement of fabrics for your quilt top. Question number 9. What's the easiest pattern for a beginner? That is just a real subjective question because it just kind of depends. Some beginners can start out with something a little more difficult, and some beginners need something that's really very simple and straightforward. In our course, our beginning quilting course, we put together this 9 patch. It's called a disappearing 9 patch, but we start out with just sewing 9 squares together, cutting them apart, and then re-sewing them into this cute pattern. It's really fun, it's really easy, and it looks a lot harder than what it is. I think this is a great pattern to start with. Just a straight patchwork pattern is also easy. Sewing strips together helps you to master those 1/4-inch seams. Anything that doesn't have a lot of intricacy, a larger square or something where you put it together and you're able to just cut large size pieces and sew them is really good for a beginner. Question number 10. This is huge. What is the best sewing machine for a beginning quilter? Okay, this question is asked so much, and you know, it just really depends. The best machine you can purchase is one that fits your budget, is reliable, and has a consistent, straight stitch. So important. You don't need fancy features to start out. Here are some of the features to look at that I think are important. First of all, you want to make sure that your machine has an adjustable stitch length. It needs to be something that you can change it from a very tight stitch to a larger stitch depending on what you're doing. You want one that has a walking foot or the capability of attaching a walking foot. That's so important when you're quilting. You need to have that even feed foot as you are sewing through 3 layers, the backing, the batting, and the quilt top. up. You want a machine that's easily threaded. That's important as well. You want to be able to thread it yourself. You don't want one you need help every time you have to thread it. You also, I think a good feature for a machine is to have the needle down position. Not all machines have that. Can you get by without it? You can, but it's nice, I think, especially when I'm sewing, when the needle stops down and I'm able to make adjustments and then move on. So if it has that, that is a great bonus. Also, some of the machines have an automatic thread cutter. You push the button, it cuts the thread. I love that feature, but that's a relatively new feature, so you may not have that on every used machine that you would look at, and you may not have it on a new machine as well. But if you do, that's a great feature to have. You want a machine that you can get serviced locally. You don't need to send it in somewhere to have it serviced. You want to make sure that the person that you buy from can service your machine for you and can teach you how to use it. Now, brands like Janome, Brother, Baby Lock, Bernina, they all have solid beginner models. You can either buy a new machine or you can buy a used machine. It's totally up to you. When it comes to a used machine, often quilters will trade up. So I had a sewing machine that I bought, I still have it. I bought it about 21 years ago, I think it was, and it's a Janome 6600. It's like a $2,500 machine, but I bought it used and I got it for somewhere between $600 and $700. It still works. It's a great machine. It's durable, it's heavy, it has sewn like a champ for all these years. I have had it serviced and cleaned, but I love it and it works really well. And I didn't break the bank when I bought it. Now, you can also get a new machine, a smaller model, like I said. I have a Janome 3160 that I take with me to classes. It's got a great stitch, it's got a walking foot, it has the needle up and down position, it has the automatic thread cutter, and I think I paid around $600 for it. It's also a great machine, a brand new one. There are many options out there, and again, you don't need all the fancy stuff when you are quilting, especially when you are a beginning quilter. So I would suggest you go to your local dealer, test out the machines, ask them which would be best for what you need, and they're going to help you. They're great. They're always ready and willing to help, and you know you can go to them when you need to if you have questions or if you have some difficulty with it. That's what they are there for. I hope this helps you start your quilting journey with confidence. If you want a more beginner-friendly tip, check out my free workshop, How to Create the Perfect Quilt Block Every Time. It's at joyfulandmerryquilting.com. Go to the site and you can watch the videos, download the handouts, and if you have any questions, email mary@joyfulandmerryquilting.com. I am here to help you. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, subscribe to the channel, and click on the bell so you don't miss the rest of this series. I am always trying to be joyful, but I will always be merry. Thank you so much for watching.